his time as a POW of Japan. And the first reading was difficult, so I needed to take a break. I'm back again, ready to read the rest of the story. So let us change for the reading glasses. And there goes the phone. My apologies, folks. I'm a noob. Don't know what I'm doing. Didn't have the tripod set up quite right. My apologies. I've got a long trip ready to go. About 5 minutes before we were to fall out and go to work on 21 September 1944, I heard the rattle of machine gun fire. Looking up, I saw a two-motor Japanese bomber coming down on fire. The Filipinos were always trying to keep our morale up by furnishing what information they could, and the latest rumor was the Americans were pushing up from the south. The first word I said after the bomber came down was, "The Yanks are here." Within 15 minutes, the sky was full of fighters from an aircraft carrier in Halsey's task force. There would be no work on the airfield at Las Piñas, which is located about 10 kilometers from Manila that day, as the Japanese would be afraid to take us out of the compound. Up until this time, my opinion of the Navy was very low. A few days before this happened, we had dug foxholes all around the compound. They were now filled with Japanese soldiers, while the Americans were hollering and practically going crazy. This was the most beautiful sight I'd ever witnessed. We figured there were about 300 or 400 fighters in on the raid. They were dive bombing the Japanese Navy in Manila Bay, hitting troop concentrations, barracks at Nicholas Fields, and any other military installations that could be found. The raid lasted approximately 90 minutes. We were notified that we would not have any rice to eat as they could not build a fire. We didn't mind missing the chow. For about 1,300 hours, here the fighters came again on the second raid. The Japanese had the sky full of anti-aircraft fire. The Navy fighters didn't pay any attention to this and went about their job, as though they were not being fired on. Everyone was in high spirit that day, and the Japanese had to make everyone go to sleep that night. About daylight on the morning of 22 September, here the fighters came again after this raid. They'd accomplished their mission as we did not see them again. The camp commandant named Watanabe admitted that the Japanese were caught with their pants down. Our hopes of liberation were shattered as we were notified shortly after that we were going to Japan. The list of names were published and I was on it. The American base commander, Major Cecil S. McFarland, which was a very good friend of mine, asked if I wanted off the list, as there were going to be a few left that didn't have to leave. I told him I would take my assignment as it came. On the morning of 1st October 1944, we were taken by truck to the Manila port, where we were loaded onto a pig iron ship that was nothing but a coal transport ship. We were crowded into the two hulls of this ship so thick we could hardly sit down. There were about 600 personnel back in the front and rear hull. On 3rd October, my birthday, the ship pulled away from the docks in Manila. I was glad to be leaving, as I had been on many work details, received many beatings, and couldn't remember the last time my stomach had been full. On the ship with us were about 300 limeys, some who'd been evacuated from Dunkirk, poor bastards, and had later been captured in Singapore. Their ship had been bombed by Americans in the Subic Bay, so close to shore that practically all of them could swim to shore. I've read some naval accounts of this battle. They were struck by a friendly fire. The Americans did not know they were firing on evacuees from Dunkirk. It was a mess. On the second day out, we ran into American submarines. 2 of the tankers went down that day. Again, the American Navy did not know that these ships were full of POWs, not iron, and 2 of the ships were sunk. The ship I was on was rolling depth charges over the side, and every time one went off, the ship would really bounce around. I will always think the only reason we weren't sunk is because they didn't think our ship was worth a torpedo. The balance of our convoy changed course. And we anchored in Hong Kong Harbor. We stayed in this harbor for 10 days. We were allowed to go topside one time to take a bath from the fire hose. While I was taking my bath, the American P-38 strafed a Japanese ship loaded with fuel in 50-gallon drums and stored on top deck. After the ship blew up, the Japanese made us all go below. After 10 days in Hong Kong Harbor, we shoved off. No one had an idea where we were going. When we did dock, the 40th person had died of thirst. After 2 days in the hull of the hell ship, we were notified that we were going ashore. About half of the prisoners had to be carried up the ladder. We later found out that we were on Formosa. Our duty there was cutting sugarcane, sugar refinery, and farming. During our stay here, which was very short, we saw American airplanes 3 times. On 4 January 55, we were loaded on a Japanese ship again. This ship was so much better than the one we'd gotten off of. We were not so crowded, and our water and food were better. We landed at Mosher, Japan, on 18 January 45. We were glad to land as we were all being eaten by lice and bed bugs. We stayed overnight in Moyu, then loaded a train. We had to change trains here. While we were carrying the prisoners that were unable to walk, the Japanese women would spit on them. While we were passing through Tokyo, we could hear the air raid siren. The rest of our travel was by train with the blinds down. Our destination was a lead and zinc mine at Hosokura, Japan, which is in the north end of Honahu. This duty was the worst duty I'd ever been on. The Japanese commander told us we were his enemies and would be treated as such. The work was from daylight till dark. The rice ration was so small that we were too weak to do the work that was expected of us. There were 300 American and British prisoners here at this camp. We lost 28 people from pneumonia that winter. The short rations, beatings, hard work, and severe weather was beginning to get me. The last time I'd weighed, I'd tipped the scales at 100 pounds. I knew I couldn't last much longer. I was certain that I could not last another 60 days. I thought about the days of the Battle of Bataan and escape to Corregidor on a log, as if I were going to survive. My morale and the hopes of liberation were fast diminishing. And he downplays the whole escaping from Bataan on a log. He swam to another island to escape the battle on a log. At noon on the 15th of August, 1955, we were taken from the mines. When we reached topside, we heard the loudspeaker blaring out in Japanese. Women, kids and men were crying. Our hopes had been proven wrong so many times that no one could give an explanation. Next day, the Japanese commander told us it would be a holiday. Rumors were many, but we'd been disappointed so many times until no one could believe it was over with. The Japanese commander had informed us earlier that if American troops landed on Japan, we would all be shot. We were still alive, so we couldn't believe that the war was over. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th was also a holiday. On the 21st of August, 3 American shipboard fighters flew over our camp. The day before, the Japanese had written POW on the roof of our barracks. The American planes flew over our campsite several times, and each time would zag the wings in a friendly manner. The sight of Old Glory was too much, as we were all crying. One plane dropped a note which read, "The U.S. has accepted Japanese surrender, and Texas has too." The note also stated the B-29s would be here the next day at a certain time. We were all sweating out the planes the next day, and sure enough, they came. We were all wide eyes as the bomb bay doors opened. The planes were so low, some of the parachutes didn't have time to open. This drop killed 2 limeys and a buddy of mine from Goose Creek, Texas, by the name of Carl Burke Gann. A case of Corn Belt hit a Japanese soldier in the lap and drove him clear through the floor. This flight dropped a note that they would be back tomorrow with food and clothing. We were prepared for the next drop, and no one was hurt. On 12th of September 1945, an American major and 3 enlisted men entered our camp. We were taken out by rail to the port of Sendai. A.C. Meredith. One of the beatings resulted in the breaking of one of the vertebrae in my grandfather's back. And for the rest of his life, periodically, his back would go out and he'd be bedridden in pain. This is hard. That's why this is part 2. Thank you for joining the inaugural evening of Onhada on Fire's Colty Clutch Veterans Day edition. POW Staff Sergeant Meredith, in his own words, signing out. Good night.